Well, alrighty, yes. Genesis chapter 22. I did a series with the teenagers back in October of last year. Well, it was entitled, Did God Really Say That? And it was kind of the premise was there's some unusual things in the Bible that God says to us, to people, to his people to do there in the Bible. And one of them was Abraham, I need you to kill your son. I mean, that's an unusual thing that God might ask us to do. So that's where we find ourselves tonight. I think there were others, but I can't remember any of the others right here off the top of my head. But the only reason I say that is I forgot there is this fancy intro that I had made for it. We'll get to that in a second. I'd like to do something unusual. This says prayer request, not just because it's when we do it on Wednesday nights. But I thought maybe we could take a couple of moments. Are there any unusual prayer requests? Well, we'll pray for Clayton and Donna as they travel. They're on their anniversary. And pray for Annie, who has this week, and up until they come back, been taking care of Aunt Betty. Everyone's Aunt Betty. And so that may be where she is tonight. I don't know. Annie just said that she couldn't make it. I don't suppose anything's gone wrong with Aunt Betty. Just, y'all know, probably know Annie's studying to be a nurse anyway, so this might be pretty solid practice to be a caregiver, just to learn how to deal with patients who may be stressed or, anything that goes along with being a patient when you're not perfect health. So we need to pray for Denise as well, because like I said, Brother Floyd is tonight, he's a patient. So,
David Regal.
Yeah.
David Regal?
Yeah.
Okay, David Regal. He's having a heart cath in the morning. Has anyone heard anything today other than that, or is that,
Yeah, we just went and saw him, he's doing pretty good.
Okay. Does he loving being in the hospital? Or is he, yeah. Most men don't, I don't think, want to be in the hospital. So David Regal.
Tim Sharp.
Oh, yes, Tim Sharp, who traditionally plays our djembe, which is that drum, and he plays drums, but he's more than just a drummer. He's a member of our church family. So pray for Tim Sharp. What I remember is that he is on the list. He's on a schedule, but it's been pushed further away. It was already scheduled to take place, his surgery, and it's been moved again. I'm assuming that the doctors think that it's okay, or they wouldn't keep moving it. Either that, or who knows why doctors do what they do. All right, so pray for Tim Sharp. For Kay Face, she's here tonight, All right, but we can still pray for her, even though she's here. I see Mr. and Miss Wayne and Vicky, and that reminds me to pray for Anthony Stansel and his whole family and the homegoing of Loretta. That was recent, and Teresa's sister passed away as well, so pray for them. These losses, seems like there's one more passing, and I can't remember it. I should not have started this without being able to remember all three. But people have lost loved ones in the last 2 weeks, so that's a big deal too. I pray for the teenagers as they get ready to go back, some tomorrow. I don't know if are they only on half days right now? I don't know.
Full day.
They're full days, okay. And
For the superintendent election too.
Oh, that's
For
right.
the mayor election in Memphis.
did y'all hear that? The superintendent of schools there needs to be one elected, and there's an election coming. And the mayor of Memphis, really need to pray for that. It's funny, those guys that when they give their speeches, these politicians, they seem polished and well-meaning, and they give eloquent, and all these sorts of things, but is that, they just putting their best face forward, or is that really who they are? I don't know. So definitely pray for the mayor of Memphis, whatever the Lord's will is, be re-elected or a new one. I'll say pray for Leewood, of course, obviously our church in general, but also pray for our activities building ministry, our Family Life Center, or
Pray for our mission house.
pray for the mission house, the mission center, right. I'll pray for the mission house too. I don't need no troubles, right? The residents, the current residents. You guys have plenty of workers, right? To get the ball rolling there in the gym, in the blast? Don't know, okay. So pray for workers. And I will say that, that's a good segue, because I wanted to say pray for workers, for the children's ministry, for the after-school programming, the ministry to children in this neighborhood, and for the youth ministry. Pray for workers, and the bus ministry. Pray for workers, because there's tons to do. There's always a lot to do here at Leawood, but there's not a lot of people who are able, through various reasons. Time or age or commitment or stress level, whatever reasons, there are many openings here at Leawood for ministry opportunities. The music ministry, one example was just real quick, Clayton's not here and he didn't pay me to say this. There's not a lot of men in the adult choir. There's 2, 3 possible, depending on any kind of various maintenance issue. There's me and Bill and every now and then Buddy, so that's it. Some of you guys out there sitting in the audience right now, I'm sure you can sing. You just come on up and join us. We can't just have a choir of sweet ladies. There has to be some sour up there also. So we have sweet and sour in the choir.
You need to quit peddling.
Oh, that's true. Okay, I'm glad I'm far away. All right, but there's always opportunities. By the way, the thing that I had said this morning about youth ministry, about every 3 weeks, it's a case of water. That's what I need help with. Terry and I, if we can remember, we always swing by Aldi, but that's one of the, it's like, what, a case of water? That's a youth ministry need? It is, believe it or not, because we forget, and then they come up there on Wednesdays and they just have to eat their potato chips with nothing to drink. So a case of water about every 3 weeks. And don't knock yourselves out, please. If you are out, and get one. So that's what the need was this morning. I always need chaperones. The children's ministry, the bus ministry, the youth ministry, the after-school program, always need adult chaperones. The biggest reason, and this really has nothing to do with what I wanted to talk about, but anyway, the biggest reason is so that the children of this neighborhood can see that there are adults who are interested in being in their life. You know what I mean? They get that at school, and a lot of times at school, it's just sit down and be quiet, or take out your books. But church is ministry, and so all these 4 ministries that I mentioned, that's just a good way for children in this neighborhood to see that there are adults who actually care about them, just to give up their time. Not some sort of eloquent Bible study delivery necessarily, but just the time to be there. That's why they always responded so well in the summertime here at Leawood, when these mission teams of people who they've never seen before and may never see again would come and spend time with them in the gym. That's why, because it's somebody who's interested in coming to where they are and meeting them. All right, so anyway, yes, lots and lots of prayer requests tonight. Yes.
I may offer praise.
Okay.
Y'all have had my granddaughter Caroline on the prayer list for over a year concerning her back issues. And this week we had a good report that her most recent brace has brought everything back into the safe zone and has held for 6 months.
Wow. Well, there you go. Yeah, the next appointment, you say they may be through with the brace?
Maybe.
Yeah. And that's really good, because y'all will notice throughout the night that I stand here like this, like Frankenstein. I have very bad posture, so it's a big deal to catch it when you're young. One real freebie story. My mother was in the military, and so she just stood like this, with her shoulders back. She used to say she didn't know how I could stand like this. Maybe it's a guy thing. A lot of guys stand like this.
It's not just guys.
Oh, but yeah, this feels very odd. So that is a good report, because you never know with braces and things whether or not it's going to work. Yep. So, well, let's pray and then we'll move forward. And I would like to ask for a volunteer. I never get one in the youth room, but Would anyone like to volunteer? Pray just for all the requests mentioned and not mentioned. But if not, that's okay. I can do
I
that.
would like to pray.
Okay. Anyone else to join this Almeida? Almeida. I want to say the name right. Sorry. All right, let's pray.
Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this opportunity we have got this Sunday evening. Unexpectedly coming, God, to your presence. And I know you always want for your children to run to you with all our needs. And we have a praise of today, God. Thank you so much for what you are showing us, that your mercy and your love never ending and always is in one to another. We, God, come into your presence because we know that your promises, God, is be with us all the time, and that is that and that promise we are here. We lift our brothers and sisters who need healing, God. Pastor Floyd, thank you for Kay is here and you are healing her, God. We pray for Brother David Rigo. We pray God for Tim. We pray God for Aunt Betty. We pray for everyone, for Maria too, that she's sick too. God, we pray for you know everybody in this room who need, God, your healing hands. Thank you for you are there and helping to the rest of the family can surrender to the people who are sick. Give the strength to have a loving care for them, God. God, I pray too for the superintendent and the mayor and for these elections coming. God, I pray for you appointing the right person, helping us to the Christians to looking for their values, not only for the way they speak. We need see their actions and digging more in their profiles, God, to find out if they are against to the Bible and the instructions you're giving us. We must elect to another person. We don't need elect for the color of the skin, for the party where they are. We need elect somebody who can be leading us in the right path. Something conservative with values and with morals, God. Somebody to fear you, Lord. I pray too for more servants we needed, God. More fellow Christians to come in here. We need more workers in different areas. The need is growing and is growing. As Jesus Christ, you say, for us we need always begging to you, the Father, to send to here more workers, God. Thank you for who are in here and doing multitask and different jobs in here. And I lift in your hands, God, Brother John, as he's leading us today. Continue, God, give you wisdom and give the strength he's needed, God. Thank you for him and his church. God, my praise is to you because you are my Father. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
All right, if you're coming in or if you've come in recently, since I said we're in Genesis chapter 22, and here it is. Is that too loud? I'm just going to play the whole thing, even though it's good. Y'all see those things, the burning bush? Yeah. Yeah, that was one we talked about. Okay. So did God really say, kill your son? We're in Genesis chapter 22, and it's a long passage that I'd like to try to take a look at. But I'd like us to take a look at the whole passage because of the context. You know, we need the bumpers, the beginning, the end, and the middle, and just to kind of help take a look at the story. So I'm going to read. This is the ESV version, and it's 13 verses. And if you need it, they're there on the screen in case I'm in the way. But Genesis chapter 22 says this. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he said, of course, that's Abraham. Here I am. He said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love. Go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. Verse 4, on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went both of them together. Continuing on verse 7. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, my father. He said, here I am, my son. He said, behold the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went both of them together. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand, took the knife to slaughter his son. Pause. To slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Abraham, of course, here I am. He said, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Verse 13, and Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. May the Lord bless the reading of his word.
Amen.
So you guys know the story, or if you don't, let me remind you of the story that Abraham and Sarah, is that right, my Lord? It is Sarah, right? Abraham and Sarah waited for a child. Abraham, I think at this point, had already received the promise that there was going to be a great nation through him. And when I say waited, let me remind you, Sarah, I think, was 90 years old, and Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. I heard a pastor just this past week wondering, I'm sure he said that he thought maybe Abraham was wondering, how is this going to take place? I'm not getting any younger, Lord. Abraham must have thought, when are you going to do this? But of course, it was the Lord's timing, and it was on purpose and for a reason. And one of the things that I believe these verses point out, not just something unusual that the Lord asked a human to do, to kill the son that you waited 100 years for, but also to prove a few points to Abraham. Let's take a look here. This is the thing that Abraham waited for the longest. No doubt, it was Abraham's most prized possession. The most important thing to Abraham. And a little asterisk there, it's the promise of God. So Isaac gets the ball rolling on this great nation that outnumber the the grains of sand on the seashore through Isaac. And then, whatever age you think it was, there's tons of debate about how old Isaac was. And none of that matters. What matters is God says, here's your one and only son, and I want you to give him back to me. Man, there's no way any of us in this room who have children can't have thought, Lord, are you sure that's what it is that you want? Because I thought he was a promise of God. I thought he was something you asked me to wait for, and I did. Faithfully and loyally without complaining, and you finally gave it to me, and the fulfillment of the promise is on the road. If I give him back to you, which we see Abraham was willing to, I don't think that I've ever read or heard any minister or preacher or whatever, or teacher say that there was some question. Abraham did it right away. He was willing right away to give back his son back to God, trusting God completely for the fulfillment of the promise. There's none of you guys in this room that have raised children couldn't help but, surely y'all would all agree that you'd be thinking, is this really what the Lord wants? Well, I wonder, how many of us would be willing to give him back or give our child back to God, to be the one that ends his life because the Lord said to, and we trust the Lord. Now, as a freebie joke, I'll just say, in junior high ministry, there's plenty of kids I'd like to get back to the Lord on a semi-regular basis. No, I'm just kidding. They always come through and they turn the corner and most of them become good kids. But this thing that Abraham waited for, no doubt brought the joy and the completion in his thought about, Lord, when? How long do I have to wait? So surely, I'm sure of course he loved his wife, but I think these are the categorizing, searching for words. These are the things that Abraham surely was thinking. That it was his prized possession and the most important thing to Abraham. Of course, his relationship with God, pretty obviously the most important thing, or he wouldn't have just so willingly offered him back up. Well, why would the Lord ask for it back? Well, it was a test. Obviously, it was a test, but who was it a test for? Was it a test for God or for Abraham? The answer is it was not a test for God. Right there, number one, God already knew the outcome. He even knew that Abram, was going to be faithful.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And then number two, God, was going to provide.
Yeah.
Sorry. So in this situation, this is not a test for God. This is not a test for Abraham. I'm just going to say Abraham. Sorry, y'all. Whatever the slide says. This is not a test for Abraham to say, Lord, what are you going to do? Okay, Lord, I'm willing to give you back. I can't wait to see what you do. No, that's not what it was a test for. Abraham needed to know about himself.
Yes, yes.
This situation, like I say, it wasn't for God because God already knew it all. The whole story, how it was going to go.
Oh, yeah.
Even the timing and the place where he wanted them to do it. But Abraham did not know whether or not, I'm going to say that Abraham did not know whether or not he had it in him to trust God at that level. This test was for Abraham. Obviously, anytime that we are given a test of some sort, it's not always to see what the other person is going to do. A lot of times it's to see what are we going to do. What is our level of commitment? What is our level of faith?
Yes.
We showed a video series once before my mother passed away and then after, and the same video series after. And I didn't necessarily pick up on it beforehand. But the second time we showed the video series, the narrator, the guy presenting the video, made a comment about faith. We don't really know what we believe until what we believe is tested, or something like that. His point was, we don't know the level of our faith until our faith is actually put to the test.
Amen.
Like to an extreme test, perhaps. Me, like Abraham, me actually happened, losing the most important person on planet Earth to me. That's right, I was a mama's boy. I'll freely admit that. I didn't know what my level of faith was until it was tested at that level. What is our level of faith? Are we willing to lose the most important thing or person or even situation in our life? We don't know until it's tested. Most of us, and I am not any different, most of us pray, Lord, give me a chance to display my faith without being that extreme, please.
No.
I worked at night and my mother was, I better not say her age or I'll get myself in trouble again there, Marshall. She was older enough than me to be my mom. If I say her age, it'll be, anyway. But I would wonder, I work at night, when I would come home from FedEx, I can't lie to y'all, this is the neighborhood I lived in, 2 streets over. This is a tough neighborhood. And she was a senior old lady in this neighborhood all night long by herself. Okay, I'm not, my point is, I was always worried. I prayed diligently, please Lord, don't let anything happen. But then every now and then I would think, if something did happen, would that be because I wasn't faithful to the Lord enough? I mean, why would he let something happen? Is it to bring me along? Well, luckily he kept her safe tons of years, and she only passed away in 2006. But the point is this, when my mother did pass away, I was devastated. Not just sad, but obliterated is the word I would use, you guys, obliterated. Some of y'all who are here, I will tell you, not just because you're in the room, but Glenda and one of our lead youth workers, Sheila, a lady named Sheila Goodman, they were both, well, everybody was praying for me. I thought I was doing all right, but Sheila and Glenda both agreed, no, you were not doing good, and we could see it in her eyes. I was like, what? I'm doing fine. But Sheila said she had never seen anyone crumble before her eyes the way I did. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm maintaining. You know, I went on the depression diet and lost 50 pounds in 2 months. But anyway, this is not about me, this is about Abraham. The point is, Abraham had a choice. Do I trust God? And if so, what's going on here? He had to be the one who knew what the level of his faith was.
Oh, yeah.
My only relationship is when I tell the story about myself and going through that. I didn't do what so many people do. I'm not bragging, I'm just saying it's because of you guys praying for me. I did not get angry at God and leave his church. For some reason, deep in my soul, I guess I've been a church kid all my life, maybe that's why. I knew the reaction was to turn and run deeper into the church. I did not abandon God out of anger. He took the most important person in my life. I turned and ran deeper into his church, into the church family. So this, like in this situation with Abraham, this was not a test for God. What's God going to do? He already knew what he was going to do.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think that it was for Abraham. Here's the takeaway. Here's what we can take away today, I guess. What are we willing to give up? Abraham waited 100 years for his son. And let's just say that we agree he was 16 years old, Isaac. He only had him 16 years after waiting 100 years, and he was asked to give him back. Now, I wanted to pause on how far are we willing to go. See, I wanted to pause on that little section, the ESV version Bible, these verses. Abraham took the knife to slaughter his son. Slaughter, we're all familiar with that word. If you've ever been a butcher, you know what that word is. God didn't ask Abraham to just poke him, stab him, and that'll prove to me that you are willing to, injure the greatest thing in your life, or to break it, or to make it not perfect. Just poke him a few times with the knife. No. Abraham knew the Old Testament sacrifices and how that worked and how to administer it and so on and so forth. Of course he did. He raised that knife to sacrifice the most important thing in his life. To sacrifice it.
Yes.
That means he'll never have it after that day again. Sacrifice it back to God. So this is the takeaway, I think. What are we willing to give up? And how far are we willing to go? That's a question that only each of us can answer for ourselves, to ourselves. So in order to figure out what the answer to that question is, these are the things that may help us get there. What is the thing that we've waited for the longest? What is our most prized possession? And what is the most important thing to us? When I did this with this particular Bible study with the teenagers, I mean, come on. Y'all don't even have to think about what they said the answer to those three questions were. So the phone, their phone was the thing that they waited for the longest, and that they waited for their most prized possession. That's a kid thought, a toy or something, Brother David can give testimony. You guys who've raised kids can give testimony. If y'all, for any particular reason, have held off on giving your kid a toy because you're trying to make them earn it or whatever, when they get it, they go over the moon.
Yeah.
Like 1 hour later, if you try to take it, it's World War III then, no doubt. If any of the other kids, brothers or sisters, try to take it, then it's World War III. Yeah, so we as human beings, we know what it means to value something, a person or a possession. We know that we attach love, the word love, to these things. This is an amazing test that the Lord asks. Sometimes he asks us all the time, many times throughout the week. Anyone in here who's lost a spouse, no matter when it was, that wasn't, you stood there and made a promise that you were going to love this person till death do you parted, and you probably thought it's going to be years and years and years and years, and then the Lord takes them maybe way before you thought. That's something that you have to walk through, that we have to walk through. My plan was for my mother to live to be 100 years old. That's my plan for myself. I hope I get there, right? So she's only 66. That's young. That's very young. And not just because it's 10 years away from me. That's young to me, 66. You know, I wasn't ready. Completely unready. I had no idea. Abraham obviously thought this was the fulfillment of a promise. But the Lord said, I need you to give it back to me. And Abraham said, I will. But he got to keep his son. And the promise was fulfilled because here we all sit, of course. Right? So these are the questions I think that if there's a takeaway, these are it. What are we willing to give up? How far are we willing to go? You know, there's tons of examples all over this room that we could tell stories about what we thought or what the Lord asked us to do that we never thought was on our radar at all. And so maybe we can talk about them together one day or something. Everybody in this room is pretty good friends, so we always talk about these things anyway. We give our lives to these things that the Lord asks us to do, and we don't know when it's going to end. There's usually no stipulation of ending. Yeah. How far are we willing to go? Well, that's the thing that I thought about. I couldn't get away from this Bible study. Y'all already knew these principles, but I just couldn't get away from this thought for tonight. But I do want play a song that's it's a modern song, whatever that means. It's not a hymn. Let me just say it's not a hymn, okay? And as we get ready to do this, I was about to say Pastor Jeffrey. Pastor Jeffrey is going to help me with handing out the lyrics. I couldn't find the version of this song with the lyrics that I wanted, the version that I wanted us to, have to listen to worship with. It's a great song. My goodness, it's such a great song. I'm sorry, the sheets are there. And but so I printed them out. And I believe there's enough. There's 30 printouts, and we'll pass them out to see as far as they go. But thank you guys for listening patiently, and I don't know. I'll post this video on Facebook later. Maybe somebody will be blessed by it. But I'm going to let him pass them out, and then we'll listen to this song, and that'll be kind of like our closing thing. And after the song plays, we can be dismissed or what have you. So let me lead this prayer if it's not improper to do so while he's passing the sheets out. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for this time together. I really do. And I pray that someone would need this message. I don't know why I can get away from it, but you do. So Lord, I pray that you would be with the prayer requests mentioned earlier, the ones known and unknown, spoken and unspoken. Lord, I pray that you would sing to our hearts through this song that we listen to. Lord, I pray that you would help us to be thoughtful about what is our most prized possession. Is it actually you and your calling? Or is it something in our life or someone in our life? Lord, help us to be willing to give it all up if that's what you want. Lord, help us to be willing to give it all back to you if that's what you want. So that we can see that you're not really asking for us to lose something. You're asking for us to deepen our faith in you and deepen our trust in you. That is the lesson tonight. Not this great thing or great person do we lose before we want to know, Lord. Are we willing to give it up for you? Lord, help us to not be like the rich young ruler who Jesus pretty much told the same thing to. Give everything away and give the profits to the poor. But that man went away sad because he had a lot of stuff. Abraham did what you said do, and he had to keep his most prized possession. And you blessed and promised through that. So help us to be that way. Thank you for loving us. And it is in your name that I pray, and amen.